Hey guys, welcome to J.T.Engineering, and in this episode, we're gonna be continuing to work on the two tender tanks that I built for my 2.5-inch Fitchburg Northern and a solar 10-wheeler that I'll have debuting on this channel very soon. If you're following along with this build series, you'll remember that in the last video, we put together these two tender tanks using kits that I bought from Allen Models. In this video, we're gonna be focusing on one major thing, and that's installing all the valves that are in this tender. The water valves that are gonna be living in these tenders are gonna supply water to our injectors, our axle pump, and then we also have an emergency hand pump that we'll be installing in this video as well. These valves are extremely important because they provide a metered water connection to the locomotive itself, ensuring that we get adequate water when we need it and where we need it. I know that this build series is focused mostly on the Fitchburg Northern, but in this video, we're gonna be kind of putting this 30-inch tender tank aside, and we're gonna be mostly working on this 36-inch tank. I don't have enough valves or hand pumps to complete both of these projects at the same time, and since my solar 10-wheeler is so much closer to running than my Fitchburg Northern is, I'm gonna be focusing today on completing this 36-inch tender because that locomotive is the closest one to being able to steam up and run down the tracks. For those of you that are building a 30-inch tender at home, you don't need to worry because the installation process of both the hand pump and the valves is exactly the same between the 36-inch and the 30-inch tender. So this video is gonna be applicable really if you're building any tender. It doesn't matter the size. They're all plumbed pretty much the same, and they're plumbed to the way that you want them plumbed. So why don't we go ahead and get building? Before I go poking holes and stuff, I want to talk a little bit about where I got all of these things and what they actually do. So first off, let's start here with the hand pump. The hand pump, you can purchase these either from a machined kit where you build the kit yourself, or you can buy them completely assembled from Loco Parts. Completely assembled, I think they're about $450, but if there's anything that I've learned in this hobby, it's that time is money. For example, this tender pump is completely assembled and costs about $200 more than just buying the kit where you would machine it yourself. However, this kit would probably take me 2 weeks to maybe even a couple months to complete. So by buying it completely assembled, I'm saving myself a ton of time. Even though I'm paying a little bit more money, the justification of time savings is worth it to me. And the same thing can go for your water control valves on your tender. I bought these from Loco Parts as well. I think they were $85 each. I'm not a great machinist, so figuring out how to make one of these at this point in time would take me probably 2 weeks to figure out how to make one of these. This channel is just a hobby of mine. I have a lot of fun making it, but it means that I don't have all the time in the world to make all this stuff because I do have a normal full-time job. So in this hobby, pretty much everything is either pay a little bit more and save some time, or save some money and build everything. And that's up for you as the builder to decide. So let's talk about what these three valves are gonna do. So these water valves are a metered connection to the engine. One of them we're gonna be using as an injector supply line, and the other two are gonna be feeding our axle pump. One will be the line to the axle pump, and then the other will be the return so we can tune just how much water goes into the engine. The hand pump is there just in case all of these things fail. You need to have a way to get water into your boiler in case there's an emergency where your injector and your axle pump fail, especially if you're running a coal-fired engine or a wood-fired engine where you can't just shut the water off. It's not as big of a deal in a propane-fired locomotive because you can just turn the fire off, but if you plan on firing your engine with coal or wood or something similar, you have that bed of coals in there that's going to continue to produce heat. So being able to get water in your boiler in an emergency is essential. So that's what the hand pump is for. Now that we kind of know what these things do, let's go ahead and start getting some holes drilled in the tender. Let's look at the plans that I got from Allen Models and see exactly where everything's supposed to go. All right, we've got our tender drawing all pulled out, so now we can go ahead and figure out what the location of our water valves are going to be. You can see we've got a nice top-down view as well as a side view here of the tender. This is for the Fitchburg Northern, but I cross-referenced the plans for the 10-wheeler, and all the dimensions are the same as far as where the water valves go. So right now we're going to be focusing on just installing the water valves. And you can see that the front one lands 1 13/16 from the front of the tender, and then the second one is spaced 3 inches backwards. We do have one over here that's in line with this one, so we'll drill that hole as well. And then later in this video, we'll focus on the hand pump and working on the water inlet casting. So let's go back over to the tender and start marking out where our water valve holes are going to go. All right, let's get this party started. So just as a reference to the drawing, we're gonna have 2 tender valves here, one here, and then the opening for the hand pump here. So I'm gonna take this nifty little Sharpie, and I'm just gonna pull up the top here, and I'm gonna write HP right here, so I know that this is the side that the hand pump is on, because I'm gonna be drilling my holes on the bottom of this sheet, and I don't wanna drill them in the wrong spot and make the hand pump opening over here. So we can set the tender body aside for the moment, and now we're gonna start measuring out all of our holes. So first thing we're gonna mark out is we're gonna find the center line of each of the water legs. So I'll just take a tape measure and I'll give it a measure here. So we're roughly 3.5 inches plus a 1/16. So I'll just add a 32nd on there, bring it over here and make a mark. Here, make another mark, probably just go all the way down. All right, we've got our center line marked in 2 places. Now I'll just take a straight edge and line this up as best as I can. Perfect, so that right there is the center line of our part. So now you can measure from the front of here, make a mark. So now we've got both of our valve holes marked. So I'll go ahead and take a punch and just line it up right there on that line. Make a little mark. Perfect. So there are our 2 marks for our water valve. So over here on the hand pump side, we've got a water valve up here and then the opening for our hand pump. The location of this water valve here is the same, so I'll just make a mark there. And the hand pump opening, our first point of dimension is 4 1/8 to the center of that first circle, and then it's 2.5 inches long. So I'll line up my inch here, and I will mark 2.5 inches long, and those 2 are the center points of our 1 inch diameter circle. Same thing, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring in my punch, line it up, give it a smack. Now we can drill our holes. Really quick, when you're splitting inches, sometimes you can kind of mess yourself up. The opening for the hand pump is 4 1/8 inches from the front. And originally I marked 4 1/8 while I was splitting an inch, which means it would have been an inch too short. So I corrected that, made the right measurements. Measure twice, cut once, kids. Another thing, using this punch is really helpful because it leaves a little indentation in the steel so that the drill bit doesn't wander around. I do have a couple pieces of plywood sitting under here in between the rivets, just so when I do make that punch, it doesn't dent the bottom of it. But now we've got all of our holes marked, so we can go ahead and just drill them out. To drill these out, I'm gonna just step them up. I'm just using a small bit. This is like an 1/8 inch, and I'm just gonna place it in here and drill on through all of my holes. So we've got all of our holes drilled. These are just meant to be locating holes. You'll see that here in just a second because I'm going to match drill them with the bottom of the tender so that I know that that handle will line up correctly with the bottom and the top. But this doesn't mean that I can't drill out my nice little hand pump radiuses. So the radius of these holes should be 1/2 inch or an inch diameter. So the measurements that we marked here for the hand pump and these holes that we drilled are the center of the circles. I've got a step-up bit for this, and I find that these work really good in these applications. So now we've got our 2 nice holes there drilled, so I'm just going to bring over a straight edge here. I'm just going to line this up right with the edges of these 2 holes. I'm going to take my scribe. I'm going to make a fancy, happy little mark here. I'm going to do the same thing on this side, and this will give us our nice ovular opening. Is that a word, ovular? Let me know in the comments. I have no idea. All right, we got our slot cut. Let's flip it over. That looks pretty good. I'm just going to take a Dremel and kind of deburr all this and just smooth out this slot just a hair. All right, I think that technique for the hand pump opening worked pretty well. So now let's go ahead and match drill our water valve holes to the bottom of the tender. We've got our tender flipped over, so this is the bottom. So I'm gonna go ahead and set my top plate on here, and this is also upside down, so the rivets are up because this is the way that it actually would be sitting on the tender when it's right side up. And what I'm gonna do is, I don't know if you guys have seen the first video, but I can see where these panels lined up and where they correspond on here. So I'm just gonna loosely line this up as best that I can and clamp it in place. And then once I've done that, we can go ahead and through drill our water mount holes here. The reason I'm doing it this way is because if I do it where this is going to be sitting, then my holes should line up all the way through the tender in theory. The better way to do this would probably be to do it before you even assemble the tender, but I thought it would be easier to do it while everything was put together. I think it'll work fine either way, so I'm just going to get all this lined up as best that I can, and then we'll use these holes as pilot holes. It should work out pretty good. All right, I think we've got this sheet all lined up here. All the edges look pretty smooth, and this is about where it sits on the top. I might just adjust this a hair more. I'm gonna go ahead and match drill. So as I was messing around with the hand pump spacing and trying to get it aligned with the slot, I realized that I had made a bit of a mistake. Well, kind of. So when I cut the slots on the top sheet of the tender, I cut them exactly to the plans, meaning I measured exactly what the plan said, where the opening should be, so on and so forth. However, not all hand pumps are created equal, and this hand pump is clearly longer than the one that the plans were designed for, because when I set this on here and I line everything up really good, if you can see this hole right here, that is the hole for one of our tender valves. So this is a little bit problematic because, number one, the handle's gonna run right into the back of the valve. So what this means is I'm gonna have to shift my pump body back probably about an inch from where it was originally supposed to go, which isn't a big deal. I'll just have to make the cutout on the top sheet a little bit longer to accommodate the hand pump handle. But it is something to keep in mind. So if you are building one of these tenders at home, I would probably just wait to cut out your hand pump opening until you know where all these valves are gonna land, because I actually am not gonna drill these holes until we have this completely mounted, because I don't know if you can see the bottom of this. It sticks up about an inch from the bottom of the tender body. So I want to make sure that all this fits really nicely. So I'm actually going to take a little bit of a detour here. We're going to set that off to the side. And now that we've got our holes drilled, the pilot holes for our valves, we're actually going to move over to the tender frame and start locating some holes there. Well, this is the first time we've had the tender body on the tender frame, and it looks pretty sweet. Now, I know that you could see that there was a little bit of a gap back here. Now, remember, there's going to be an air tank that lives back there. It's not just going to be blank space. It looks kind of dumb right now, but it won't when it's finished. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of get this centered on the tender where I want it, and then I'm going to clamp it down, and then we're actually going to drill our holes to mount the tender to the tender frame. So I'm shooting for 1 and I think 3/4 inches here on the front. That might be a little far back. Again, I'm not building this tender frame to the plans, or it wasn't built to the plans. So I'm kind of just winging it here. It's pretty damn close. So now that we've pretty much got the tender body right where we want it, I'm gonna go ahead and just put a couple pieces of wood on here to act as spacers so my clamp has something to grab onto without bending the sheet metal. All right, we are ready to drill some holes. So first off, we're gonna be drilling our mounting holes, and this is what's gonna mount the tender to the tender frame and the tender deck. I didn't really know what the best way to do this was. I considered trying to drill and tap into the frame, and I think that that's the best option. However, I think it would be pretty difficult for me to land right in the frame and be able to tap it and mount it and everything. So what I've done is I've gone out and I've got a bunch of 1032 screws with some fender washers, and the fender washers should spread out the load, so I'm just gonna through bolt it through the deck. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try and land right on the center of these strips. If you recall from the video where we decked the tender, these strips are about 1 inch wide, so I do have a little bit of play. These don't have to be perfect. They're not visible in any way because it's all gonna be either in the tender or underneath is where the bolts are gonna sit, so you'll never see it unless you flip it over. So I've just got my drill bit. I'm gonna go ahead and drill those holes. I'm also gonna drill my pilot holes for my tender valves. I'm gonna bring in the 10-wheeler tender here for just a second to show you something, since you can't really see it in there. If you can recall, we match drilled our holes on the bottom for the tender valves using the top sheet. And if you can see here, they're just like maybe not even an 1/8 inch hole. The reason I haven't rounded these out to the full 7/8 dimension yet is because it's so much easier to find the center of a hole with a really small drill bit rather than drilling out this hole and then having to do some guesswork and figure out where the center of the hole is. So I'm just gonna use a small bit again in here to just mark it on the tender, and then we'll drill out the holes everywhere else once all of the holes are match drilled and lined up. And for this, I'm gonna have to get on the table. Oh shit. So I'm gonna start just with my tender valve holes. I know you can't see it, but I'm just gonna set my drill in here. Oh geez, it's tight with those freaking things. Get it lined up on the hole. There's that one. That one. Okay, so they're just marked in the top of the tender deck, and when we remove the tender, we'll bore out our hole with a 2-inch hole saw so that it'll accommodate this. We'll see that here in just a second. But while I'm up here, I am gonna drill my mounting holes. I'm just doing this by eye. I've got 3 of them on each side for the 30-inch tender, and then 8 on each side for the 36-inch tender, but this looks pretty good. Looks like it's centered up pretty well. We've got our mounting holes drilled. There's one more hole that I'd like to drill, and that's for this fitting that's for the output of the hand pump. This doesn't really matter where it goes, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take our hand pump and I'm just gonna slide it in here, and I'm gonna set it right about where I want down here in the tender body. And I know you can't see this on camera, but it'll make sense here in just a second. And all this does is this just connects the output of the hand pump to some kind of fitting that we can then send to the locomotive. I'm just going to drill the pilot hole, and then once we take the tender off, just like all the other water valve holes, we'll bore it out just a little bit so that this has room to sit flush against the tender deck. So I'm just going to take my drill, make a pilot hole right here, and that should be good. It marked it on the bottom of the tender. And now we can remove the tender body and finish off our holes on the deck. So we can see our mounting holes here. Some of them I drilled all the way through, some of them I wasn't able to, but I'll just come in here with the drill bit, finish it out here, finish it out here. All right, so now we're gonna drill out our 2-inch diameter hole here so that the bottom of the water valve has somewhere to sit. So I'm just gonna go ahead, taking it slow. Oh shit, god damn. There's 1, 2, 3. Perfect. So now we've got our holes. So now that we've got our holes punched out, you can kind of see why I drilled those out as large as I did. This is going to sit on the bottom of the tender tank here. So if I wouldn't have drilled this out, it would have been sitting on the top of the tender like that, and the whole tender would have been sitting off the deck by about 1/16 of an inch. So this allows it to sit completely flush on the deck. And this hole looks like it's pretty good. It's going to allow me to move the tender around just a little bit when I'm aligning all the holes, which is perfect. So now we can go ahead and we can move over to the actual tender body, and we can match drill these holes and mount them to the bottom of the tender. Neat. Okay, we are finally ready to drill these holes to size. So this is just the base here that I've taken off. And the way this is going to work is it's going to slide down in there like this. The diameter of this hole is just under 7/8, so I'm going to drill these out to 7/8 of an inch. For stuff like this, I like to use these step bits. I think they work incredibly well, actually. So I'm just going to set this in here. Perfect. Perfect. With that complete, we can do the same thing with the hand pump output port. This one's a little smaller, so I'm just going to kind of work my way up and check it as I go. Bingo. So we're ready to match drill all of our mounting holes for the fittings for the tender valves as well as the exit for the hand pump. And to do this, it's as simple as just dropping in this part where you want it and drilling a hole. So you saw that as I was drilling that, it was kind of jumping around a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop a screw in there and then connect the bolt up from the bottom, which kind of is a little bit of annoying, but it'll keep it from moving around. We got one screw in there holding that tender valve in, and now I should be able to go around and drill the remaining holes without the fitting jumping all over the place. Okay, we're moving along pretty good. Now we've got all of our outflow fittings on there, which is awesome. So I'm going to try and fix my hand valve cut location here really quick. So I know this is not the right way to do this, but this is just set on this little thing, and I'm just going to bring in my tender valve here and bring it forward about as close as I want to get, which is about there, I think. With this kind of all mocked up and assembled, I can now look and see how much further back I need to move the slot in this hole. And just from looking at it, it looks like it's about 1 inch. And this is based off of where I originally had it. And I will go ahead and say, I mean, I could get away with even a little bit less than that, but I think I'm just going to go 1 inch. We should then be able to mount the hand pump in there and not worry about the handle hitting the top sheet. And at that point, we're pretty much done with the tender plumbing other than just putting a drain valve in, but that should be pretty simple. Now that we got our tender pump hole thingy figured out and all of our holes drilled, we should, in theory, just drop right in here. Oh, geez. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Look at how she sits flush against the tender. So if we wouldn't have punched those 2-inch holes in the tender deck, it wouldn't have sat flush because it would have been sitting on just that little thickness of metal there. That looks pretty good. I think I'm happy with that. Now, since there was a little bit of a debacle with the hand pump handle opening, I'm going to pivot just a little bit, and I'm going to attempt to drill these holes while it's in the tender here. And I can line it up pretty close to where I want that All right, I gotta do that again. So after that little hand pump tender opening debacle with the top side and the slot not being long enough, I'm gonna kind of pivot with how I'm gonna mount this tender pump because I want it to reference where this handle goes. So I'm gonna go ahead and screw this valve seat back in here. And this will be able, there we go. So this will give me a reference with how far forward this pump can sit. So I'm just gonna slide it in here and set it right about where I think it should go. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring in the top sheet, but as you recall, these are still just pilot holes. So I think I'm just gonna start with opening these holes up to about a 1/2 inch. I want it to be as tight as possible around these shafts, but if it doesn't work out and it needs to be a little bit wider, I can 3D print some like little flanges here so that it'll drop down inside and keep the tender sealed up really nicely. I want to try and reduce all the hole sizes on the top of the sheet so dust and debris and leaves and stuff don't fall into the tender. So I'm going to go ahead and set this aside just for now, and we're going to punch out our holes here, and hopefully everything lines up. This has been a little bit of a process, but we are getting there. So the size of the hole I want to reference the shaft that the valve goes on, I would like it to be pretty close. So I'm just going to open up the hole a little bit, check it, open it, check it, so on and so forth. Oh. We're gonna try that. I don't know if it's gonna line up that nicely, but that is a nice fit. Okay. There we go. There's no way. There's no way that I am that good. So I'm just going to open it up one more step, see where that gets us. Okay, so now we're going to install the valve shafts. This is muy importante. It's easier to do this up on the table. Now we're going to install both of our valve shafts here, and then we'll hope that our match drilling paid off and that these land directly in the center of that hole. I have a feeling this is gonna be like docking the space shuttle. Hole there. Oh, holy cabooses. What? It fits great. That's amazing. So that match drilling definitely paid off. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put in the 4 screws that are gonna be holding the top sheet down here in the front. And then I'm just gonna move around this hand pump with my hand and try to get it so that it's exactly where I want it. And then hopefully we can carefully take the sheet off and drill at least 2 holes to kind of hold everything together in this orientation. And then we can completely bolt it down. But man, this is the first time we've had it on here like this. Let's put the little handles on and see how it looks. I'm amazed that those all lined up like they did. That's crazy train. So now that we got this on here, I'm just gonna stick this piece of bar that I have in the opening for the hand pump handle, and I'm just gonna kind of move it and make sure it's relatively centered in the slot and doesn't bottom out on either side, which it looks like I've got, honestly, plenty of room on both sides. I'm kind of just doing this by eye. That right there looks pretty good. So now we get to do the super fun task of really carefully taking this apart and hoping to get at least 2 holes in there, because that hand pump location is pretty much perfect, or at least find a way to mark the holes down in there. Just so you guys see what I'm working with here, I'm going to try and take this really long drill bit and come all the way down and attempt to drill at least 2 of these, if not all of them. That would be pretty nice. So let's see how this goes. Up on the table again. So you can see I found like this 1 foot long drill bit, and if I can just get it pretty close to centered in these holes, that should be good enough. Let's try it. It's like drilling a hole with a spaghetti noodle. Did I do it? I think I did it. Let's move the hand pump and see. Winning the noodle. And we've got those holes marked. Get the pump out of here. I'm gonna rotate the tender up and out just like so. And then I'm just gonna clear out these holes with a larger bit, and that should allow us to hopefully bolt this tender pump in. Perfect, that looks good. All right, well, we're a little bit off, which is fine, I guess. That's what you get for drilling a hole with a spaghetti noodle. So 2 of these do line up, so I'm going to put these in place, and then I should be able to get these to relatively easily. After messing around for what felt like an eternity, I think I have the hand pump mounted in here, and if it doesn't line up with the slot I cut up here, I'm gonna fucking cry. Again, like docking the space shuttle. Oh! 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 That should work. It's not perfect, but it's hashtag close enough. Ma'am, what do you think about the choo-choo?
It's great.
That's it?
You're doing great.
Oh my God.
What do you want me to say?
So now that we've got the hand pump installed, you can see that the nuts and the bolts are sticking down through the bottom of it. So we're gonna need to countersink our deck here as well so that they have somewhere to live and the tender will sit flush. These are just here temporarily holding in the pump, but I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna drill out 1/2-inch holes here. But the problem with that is the secondary ones, or the inner ones, are sitting right here on the frame rim, where there's these screws that hold the deck into place, into the frame. So I'm just gonna remove those screws or drill them out and do my best to try and countersink a hole that's big enough that will fit a smaller nut in there. Oh, jeez. So after messing around for like 20 minutes trying to get these bolts to countersink into the deck so that the tender actually sits flush on the deck, I have accomplished it. However, I'm all about highlighting my errors on this channel, and I used the dole drill bit and it chipped all of this junk out. I was lucky enough that I could find the chips, so I'm just gonna glue this back in, and when the tender tank is laid down on the deck, you can't actually see that anything's wrong, so it's okay. It's a little bit disappointing, but it is what it is, and I learned my lesson, and I hope that you learned yours too. This is what it looks like after I eat a lot of Taco Bell. We're pretty much finished up with the valves on this tender, but we do have one more valve that we need to install, and that is the water drain valve. This is so you can drain your tender whenever it's not in use, because you don't want to leave it sitting full of water. So this valve is simply just a way to drain it. So finding out how I wanted to do this was a little bit tricky. What I ended up doing is I found these bulkheads on Amazon. The OD here is about 3/4 of an inch, and the inner diameter is threaded to 1/4 NPT pipe thread. So I just found this valve on Amazon as well. It's all brass. It's pretty nice actually, and it's just a simple ball valve. You open and close it to drain the tender. So these I think should work pretty well. So the way that this bulkhead will work, we'll drill a hole in the bottom of the tender pan that is the same diameter as this, and it will slide down through the tender pan. And then this little nut here will just screw all the way on and kind of clamp it down. We'll also have to drill a hole out in the tender deck, obviously, so this has room to fit through, but that shouldn't be a problem. But there is one thing I want to change about these bulkheads, is you can see that these are probably a little over an 1/8 inch tall. So what that means is if your tender is sitting completely level on the track, theoretically, it would only drain down to where there'd be an 1/8 inch of water left in the tender. Now, that's not a ton of water, and it's not always going to be like that, but I want to try and get as much water out as I possibly can. So what I'm going to do to fix this problem is I'm just going to drill some holes on each of these faces here that will allow water to be completely drained out of the tender, given that the tender tank is actually level on the track. So I'm just going to throw this in the mill and punch some holes, and then we'll drill the hole in the tender and get it installed. All right, we're over in the mill. We've got this set in the vise here. I'm just centering this by eye and kind of making sure that it's square in here by eye also. It really doesn't matter as long as the hole just passes all the way through into the inside. So now once you got that set, go ahead and turn on the mill. It's really cold in my shop, so it's having a hard time. I'm just like that. And you can see here that this hole will pass all the way through into the inside. There are some burrs in here, but that doesn't really matter because the threads on the actual valve don't come up far enough that it matters. So I think this should work out pretty well, so I'll just do it on the other 5 faces, and then we'll install it in the tender. And you can see we've got our holes drilled in all the faces, and that should allow water to drain basically all the way out of the tender, with the exception of maybe just a little bit, but it should work good enough. Back over to the tender now that we've got all of our holes drilled in our pass-through fittings. I'm going to mount the tender body to the frame, and the reason being is I want the valve to land somewhere in between these two frame rails, approximately in the middle of the engine, maybe back here. I haven't quite decided yet, but I want to be able to get to this valve relatively easy without fumbling around and having trucks and stuff in the way. And another thing to worry about too is that these frame rails are about 3 inches apart, so if I'm not careful about the placement of my hole, I won't be able to thread this into the fitting into the bottom of the tender. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna mount the body to the frame and then put it on its side, and then I'll be able to mark the hole and get exactly where I want this valve to be while the tender body is connected, and then I'm just gonna punch all the way through with the drill. So you can see what I meant by if this valve is too far down, it'll hit the frame and I won't be able to thread it into my through fitting here. So what I'm gonna do to mark this hole is I'm just gonna take a nail, I'm just gonna put it right through the middle of that valve, and I'm just gonna kinda, I think this is where I want it, so I'm gonna center it on here and give a visual look to make sure that I can actually swing that around and thread it, and I can. I'll just take my hammer, just make a hole or a mark. So I'm just gonna make a pilot hole here. This is just like, I don't know, an 1/8 inch, something, it doesn't really matter. And I'm gonna drill all the way through the deck and through the tender body. Perfect, and now we can take the tender off and we can open up that hole to accept the 3/4 OD of this through fitting. Body mounts are off, so we'll just slide off the tender body. It's getting heavy with all those valves and stuff in it. Yeah, now we got a nice hole right here that we can use to drill through for our fitting. I'm gonna use a step bit because I think they're freaking awesome. I love them. And here we just wanna make sure this isn't a body mount hole, and it's not. That would suck. Let's just make sure. There it is. Yeah, okay. All right, that makes sense. Let her rip. Let's see if that's good. Yeah, that should be good enough. I want the hole to be a little bit big just so I know I can get it to fit. And now we'll do it on the tender. Perfect. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to drop this fitting down in here. Just like so. And then I'm gonna set it all in place, and then we're gonna use this and thread it on through the bottom so that it actually threads on in between the deck of the tender and the tender piece itself, and that'll add another attachment point to the frame. So now when we flip this up, take our drain valve, now we can thread it on. Boom. Low profile, can't really see it. You wanna drain the tender, you just go boop, done. So that's it. We're done with the valves on this tender body. This bad boy can fit so much water in it. So you can see the valve right here. You just turn it on like that. All the water would drain out of it. When you're ready to turn it off, boop, done. Well guys, I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for watching. These tender valves and the hand pump are fit in this tender just how I wanted them. And I gotta say, I think that it looks really nice. I might install these tender hand valves in the lathe and just drop down this wheel about 1 inch just because I kind of think I want them a little closer to the tender top, but that's something that we're gonna do in another video, I think. We still have a lot of work to do on this tender. For example, it will not hold water. There's just not a watertight seal around any of these panels. So in the next video, we're gonna be sealing off the tender and making sure that it's watertight, finishing up our details, and hopefully we're gonna get some paint lettering on it and she's gonna look beautiful. Until I see you guys again, keep that steam pressure up and I'll catch you on the next one. Adios, amigos.